so I'll repeat that. So anyone that's following, you would know that you can access through YouTube. If you share this with someone that you think might benefit from the content, they should go to YouTube, go to calvinchin.com and subscribe. Look for the Tai Chi Paradigm content, and you'll be able to access that. And along with that, when we do the live videos, you'll get a notification that we're going to be doing something live, and it'll remind you that it's going to happen. So that's really a good format to go to. And then you give us a thumbs up, that makes us even look better. So anyways, that would be helpful. One of the things we always do is start off with the same set of exercises. So there's the consistency, and if you're worried about you can't remember all of these, that's why the videos are important. And in learning any of the things that we do, important thing is to focus visually on what you see, because the more you see it, the more it registers up here, and it starts to translate, because everything that you take here has to be interpreted somehow. So between what I talk about, what you see, and the referencing that I do, whether it's a circle or a square or a triangle, all of these things start to make sense over time. Now, if I go like this, you see my body swaying, I'm really shifting weight. So, by watching and knowing what your goal is as far as the specific movement, then you'll start to pick up on what's going on, and you're not really memorizing every little detail, you're just responding to what's going on. So, that's kind of the way we learn. And, when we learn, we use different ideas and different tools to capture those images and to reference. It's like a name. You get someone's name and you really have a little trouble remembering it, and then you see that person more often, you start to remember the name or recall the name, or you reference some other thing as a reference to recall. So, that's how we memorize things. Even memorizing numbers, it starts to fall into, well, that kind of is something that you relate to. I mean, just 2 digits you might reference, well, you could reference your age, and that would automatically, you'd always remember, or reference that number that's something that maybe it's your address, or maybe it's an old phone number. You just correlate those, and those numbers become ingrained in here because you have a reference, and that really makes it easy to recall something. Now, when we're doing this, we always start here and we turn. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So what are we doing? We're turning our shoulders. 1, 2, 3. And it's not very forceful. We're just trying to get our body to go to this side. So remember, it's right and left. When the elbows are out, you go right and left. So that's our waist turning exercise. We go to the side. We bend. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And the thing is, when I bend like this, my hip is going to go that way. When I bend like this, my hip is going to go that way. So if it doesn't want to go that way, it's because the body is resisting. So feel like you can let your body go this way. So the whole movement incorporates a bit of bulging on the hip on this side. This side is like that, and then this happens on the other side. So if you know what concave and convex is, that was the first thing you learn when you take woodworking, that you learn about a board being concave and convex. So then concave, it's hollowing, and convex, it's kind of the opposite. So your body, if you're thinking it as, we don't want to be a board, but if you think of it as a board, we can bend from side to side, so you have one curving here, and it's concave on this side, and so your body will create this shape, and it's kind of bending. So that's a reference. You kind of say, okay, now I know the body's supposed to do that. Now when we're here, we lift up and we reach down, and we stretch, we exhale, we let go, and we reach down as far as we can, and we call it a stretch because we want to reach down, and you want the muscles in the back of your thighs to let go, and your bending actually comes from the hip. So between the back of the legs and the lower back, you'll get a stretch. And then you go to this side, and you go to this side. And we're back to center. When we inhale, we go up. We lift up. When we exhale, it goes down. When you inhale, you fill. When you exhale, you empty. Inhale, exhale. And then you take it up, and you reach down. Go to the side. 1, 2, 3. And we're back. Inhale and exhale. Okay, so that's the breathing that we do in Tai Chi or in these warm-ups specifically. Now we have the circle. So the same thing is happening with the hips. You had that position from side to side. Now we're going to take it all the way around, creating a circle. So we'll go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Reverse. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, next, cross your arms, hold your knees. We're going to do a few circles like this, maybe around 10, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now let's switch to the other side. We're going to switch hands. You know, we have one on the outside, and we're going to bring the other one to the outside, and we're going the other way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, we stand up. Now this circle, I call it a waist exercise, and then there it's a knee exercise. So we just use that as a reference as to what area of the body that we can focus on. But actually, when you're doing this, it's not really just a waist movement. Actually, your hips are actually shifting and moving. Your ankles are kind of yielding to each other. You're creating a small circle there. And then your torso is kind of swaying a little bit, and you have some weight shifting going on in the legs. So it's a total body movement, and what's going on there is you're managing the size of the circle and monitoring the feeling of that circle, and you're working the joints to create a shift. So this is lower half of the body being maneuvered, area that we probably seldom use in this way. So when we learn to shift our weight and try to hold our body in a certain position for balance, you can't do that if your body's too stiff and too rigid. So one of the problems that some of you may have or maybe going through is the rigidity in the body, and how do you overcome that? Well, if you shift and you move, it becomes an exercise, but it's also developing the motor skill to learn to kind of relax and let your body create these different shapes. The shapes that we develop in the form and in the movements that we're learning actually helps us align our body and relax the musculature that allows us to do these. So, whether it's lifting or bending your knees, it's really controlling these joints. In the lower half, when we make these circles or the knee exercise, your ankle's working, your knees are doing something, your hips are doing something, and you're sustaining the upper body with your hands crossed like this. So your body really is learning to adapt with space. So that's, what happens when you learn Tai Chi, because we're dealing with movement in space, referencing, using your body as a reference, but also referencing the space. Knowing where your body is really a kind of what they call proprioception. So knowing where the body is sort of building that sixth sense. It's a term used, but it's also just realizing where your body is. It's in space. You're trying to develop some three-dimensional movement by controlling, the shapes and sizes of these different patterns. Okay, now that's there. And then we're going to go up to this area, and we want to move our head. Now the neck muscles, which there are a lot of them that control our head so that we can turn, to look, to go up and down, to tilt the head. All of these things are directions. So we turn like this, we free up the muscles, and we're not, essentially I said even in the morning class that it's a stretch. We're stretching in a sense, but not holding, because holding becomes a problem if you can't release the tension. And then, so we go here for an instant. And if you do it like this with just an instant of turning and back and forth, you actually will develop, a control, which is really a muscular contraction and a relaxation. And the fact that you're doing that doesn't allow either one of them to dominate the motion. Now, when we're sitting with this, the head, which is like, they say it's like a lump on a log, well, it's sitting on your shoulders, and what's holding you up are these muscles. So you have to control these in a position, and if it's balanced, your head shouldn't be tipping. Now, when we turn, we're doing that. When we go up and down, now you involve the back of the neck, and you're doing this. So the same thing happens. You're using these muscles, and they're all tied and connected so that we learn to do this. Okay, so that, because we're not holding it in a position very long, you're just passing through, we can stimulate circulation in this area. So the whole premise of movement is to create circulation, to bring blood, which brings oxygen into the musculature to keep, that muscle contraction working, and brings nutrients and so forth throughout your body. But this area, a lot of times people are very tight, and that's all connected down into the shoulders and into the shoulder girdle. So all of this stuff has to be moving in order to get better circulation. So, unless you have a slip disc or you have a problem with your neck where you're like this, this is something that you should do regularly and do it gently. You don't have to force it. Now, turning. All of these movements are something that we are capable of doing, and we do this for a reason. Okay, so we're turning and turning. Here again, don't hold it too long. Don't hold it too long, and then it comes back to center. Okay, so then we have the circular movements. So circle is sometimes a little difficult for some people, but if you work at it and try really hard to get it to happen, then you will build that coordination. But here again, anything involved in the neck area, don't overdo it and don't do it forcefully, because what happens is you could get a stiff neck. And, like I mentioned earlier, a stiff neck comes from holding a position too long, and the musculature kind of is imbalanced, and then something will kind of get tweaked, and then you'll have a stiff neck or a pinched nerve and so forth. Sudden movements that happen quickly, like whiplash and so forth, it's happens suddenly, so your injury is, going to be much more concentrated, and maybe the disc will or even strain your neck because there's a reaction. When you're doing this, you don't want to be whiplashing, you don't want to be going through anything fast, just trying to get circulation into the area. That happens when we do the shoulder roll. All of this really involves this upper body. So doing that, you can do that sitting down, you can do it standing up, but mainly it's to get some mobility in here. And the reason we need to turn our head is to look, to see where we're going, or maybe if the eye only reaches here for peripheral vision, then you turn a little bit and you see more. It just increases the field of vision so you can take in more when you're driving or walking or going spaces, you have to be able to move the head. I mean, you move the head up to see what's up there. You move the head down to see what's down there. And that's very seldom do we really look at things like this because it's going to be distorted. Unless you really had to go look underneath, like if you're working on a project and that's when you would have to tilt and look and then go underneath to see what you're trying to see. So that's really the purpose of our head turning. But, we can move those muscles, believe it or not, or move this. So while we think of moving our arms as a motor skill, this is actually a motor skill too. You're moving it, and is there any functionality to that? It really depends on how you look at it. And the thing is, if you're leaning on something with your head, there's a purpose there. You put your head on a pillow. If you didn't have something to support your head when you sleep, your neck would be pretty tired if you were just hanging off. If it was hanging off the edge of the bed. So there is lying down, and there's a purpose to support the rest of your body. Okay, on that note, we're going to go deep breathing. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. So now we're going to spread the feet. And look at what we do here. We pivot on the ball of the foot, the heel of the foot, the ball of the foot, and set. So if you notice that we pivot on the ball and the heel, it opens and closes our legs, the lower appendages. So when we go like this, it spreads the heel. When you go like this, it spreads the toe. And it go like this, it straightens out your feet. So how that action is created is because your hips are turning in and out and in and out. So that's opening and closing your hip. The opening and closing hip is important. Some people have flared feet. Some people are pigeon-toed. Some people just have straight feet. So it's really how the musculature is creating that. So when your feet are turned in, it's getting pulled in. So that's natural for some people. Flared out a little bit is natural for some people. But is that the real natural position? Maybe it's not really a natural thing. It's maybe because the musculature or the muscles have grown into that. But then it could be a natural thing depending on how the musculature was developed and designed for your body, because maybe one side is shorter than the other. So that could be, something that's a physical thing. But then to keep the feet straight would be the neutral position. And then if you turn it out, you would be going into the opening. And then if you kick your heels out, that's the twisting of the thighs going in, turning the hips in. So that's a kind of inward-outward movement because we can go both ways. So because of that, we develop some flexibility in the hip. Something that's important to keep the joint moving. And again, circulation, motor skill, and control. So why do we have to control our movements? Because movements will dictate what's going on as a function. So if I turn my foot this way, and that's really pivoting on the heel, right? So if I pivot on the heel, it'll take me in a direction. If I pivot on my toe, it'll take me in a direction depending on where the foot is to begin with. So if my feet are like this, 90 degrees, pointing in two corners, okay? So when you look at this and you say, well, which way can I go? You really can't go either way. You can go forward like a penguin and walk like this, but that's not a comfortable way of walking. It's not natural. If I want to go that way, first thing I do is have to turn on the ball of my foot to take me in that direction. Now, if my feet are like this, I can turn the foot into that direction first and then go like this. If this is pointing in that direction, I can go like this. If my feet are square, straight, then I can turn the foot that's on the side of the direction that you want to turn to. So in other words, if my feet are like this, and I want to head that way, if I turn my head, what has to happen? I can't look over there and walk over there because my feet are over here. So what I have to do is turn my head and then allow my body to go in that direction. Now I'm facing out. So what is important in going in a direction is where the hips are. So if my toe goes like this, then I want my hips to go like this, and then I will head in that direction. So a lot of these concepts or even principles, it's really something that we don't pay attention or think about until we say, okay, this is what's happening. Now what do? I turn my hips. Most of the time when your hips are facing a direction, and your toes would be in the same direction because they're actually structurally in line. Now this is where the misalignment comes in. When you're like this, now you really can't decide which way you're going to go. So you do it by the second movement, and you turn like this, and then you would be able to head in that direction. So, this is something that you might kind of look at and then think about, and then it starts to make sense that if you're in a position like this and I turn like this, I'm going to head in that direction. Remember, the same side, you go in the same direction. So depending on where you go. So my right foot is pointing this way, and in your case it's the left foot, you would turn like this. Okay, that's mirror image. Let's do it in the same direction. If my feet are like this, I have a right foot and a left foot. Okay, I want to go left. My foot is already headed left. I'm going to just turn like this. Turn my head and then let the body follow that, and then I'll go in that direction. Now, if you can't turn your head, then just turn the foot, and you're going to head in that direction. Okay, if I look over here, I can turn my body, head in that direction, because I'm going to take the next step. Now, like I said, if you don't turn your head, you just turn the body, and you're going to be heading that direction. So my hips are square to there. My hips actually are square, but I don't have the option at this point until I straighten my feet. So I pulled my toes together to take me into the center. If I pivot on the ball of the foot here, that's shoulder width, but it's not the best position to be in to take a step. So why is this better than this? We do all our exercises in this position. Why is this not a good position to be taking your step, whether it's right or left? In fact, stand here like this and tell me which leg you can move, right or left. Your answer probably is, I can't move either one of them, mainly because your weight is distributed 50-50. In order to shift your weight, you have to move to one side or the other. That's why we shift the weight. That's why our hips have to be somewhat flexible. Flexible or pliable to accommodate a position of unweighting. Now, if I go like this and I unweight, still a little bit awkward to take that first step. Why? Because I don't have enough weight over this foot. When is the weight over this foot and easiest to take the first step is when the foot gets to here. Okay? So that's why when your feet are like this and you pull it together by pivoting on the heel, the center is more toward the middle position where there's balance. The weight is 50-50, but the extreme shift is gone. This is the extreme shift. And in fact, the bigger your stance is, the harder it is to take a step. So nobody walks like this, right? When you're in this position, you have to learn how to maneuver. So you would come to the center, then you would move. So that's how you would shift from a shoulder width stance and then take your step. So these are all these options. Feet parallel, feet shoulder width. Feet 45 degrees as a training method to kind of set up the open hip position, the neutral position or the square position, and then you have this, which is toeing in, which is a turning of the thigh inward, kicking it in. So when we do this, that's really to take us in a direction, and then we're going to move like that. So you can see, if you control your lower half of your body, especially with the warm-up exercise we're doing, you're going to become more aware of how to move the lower half of your body. Now, we focus a lot on the upper hands for some of the posturing, but taking it down to the fundamental level of what we need to do on the functional side is to improve walking, to improve standing, improve balance, and improve mobility. So that's functionality. So functionality is a key thing that I want to get across to anyone that might be facing some things that are happening from the Parkinson's. Could be rigidity, mobility, walking, because that's something that's always being tested, is your gait. How fast can you walk? That speed is not always the best thing to focus on, mainly because you're just forcing it. If you learn to move agilely, then the speed becomes part of how, in the execution, how fast you can start to shift your weight. So it's not really how fast you can move your body, it's how correctly you can move your appendages. And how correctly you move appendages has to do with the efficiency of shifting your weight. The more efficiently you shift your weight, the better mobility you'll have, going forward. So the thing is, don't start your walk from here. This is what we do in the warm-ups, but that's to develop balance and stability in this position. So if you were standing, say, looking at something for a long period of time, this is probably not the ideal position to be standing in. It might be a little bit wider. Because in a little bit wider position, you have a little bit of forward-backward control from the soles of your feet, and then the body is supported more in line like this. Now, when you pull your hips together like this, actually your hip is going inward a little bit. Your legs are going flaring in. So that's a really not as natural a position. But it is the position that you want to be in, maybe 3 inches apart or 2.5 inches for the front walk. But your goal is not to, your goal is to keep the center of mass along that line, but also to be able to shift without swaying so much. Okay, so if you sway a lot, you can see just the efficiency of your movement. If I were to walk from here to there and I swayed like this, it would take me a lot longer to get there, because now the point A to point B is no longer as linear as it could be. It becomes a zigzag. So the zigzagging becomes inefficient. You want to be efficient, so you want to walk from point A to point B, passing through center as directly as possible. So in the Tai Chi footwork and the Tai Chi stepping, we do a lot of shifting of weight, and it's slow, and it does go through kind of a zigzag, but it takes you through this course that allows you to, it's part of the training. It's taking you through a course. In other words, this is 45 degrees, and I'm in this empty stance, what we call it. Then we have this archery stance. That's the forward, back, and lean. But when I toe out like this, that teaches me how to get my foot over here. Now, because my feet are spread, I can't get over there until I shift my weight, and I turn my hips, and now I'm in that direction. If I pivot like this 90 degrees, I'm here. So that's really what's happening in the footwork in our Tai Chi stepping. So I break that out to give you a sample of why this would be working. Because while Tai Chi is your goal to learn, and then there's the form, you may not experience this type of shifting for a period of time before you start to memorize more of this. So I break out this concept of the footwork so you can see that the body mechanics, the mechanism to put you in a position and then walk and move more efficiently, is taking a theoretical side of what happens in the Tai Chi and put it into these drills so that we can maybe prevent some of the progression, or actually teach you how to move more efficiently. And ultimately, that's what the goal is, to give you this training tool to take you in a direction and give you a tool to work with that's simple enough for you to grasp, you know, in the understanding and capture these ideas. And the more you understand these ideas, the more, the bigger the tendency, or the more of the tendency that you'll practice this. Because practice makes perfect, and practice is how we learn. Without doing this over and over again, say, turning like this and turning like this, just doing that will start to build an understanding in the body. But not only that, you're moving. You're moving your joints, and you're building some flexibility. And the whole premise is, if you do it and you start to feel comfortable with doing that, and you're standing in a position, you're feeling comfortable shifting your weight, what's the benefit of getting that to happen? What's the biggest benefit? The biggest benefit is knowing. And once you know, what happens when you start to know? You build confidence. You feel comfortable within what you're trying to do, with what you're dealing with. So, if it's walking, if it's moving, it's turning a corner, you start to develop an understanding and the confidence that you need to follow through with the practice. And it'll evolve forever as long as you kind of work with it. And it'll keep you in tune with what's happening in the body. But if you're going to just sit and not do this and not move your body, things will go down. And that doesn't apply to just a person with Parkinson's. It applies to anybody, because if you don't move it, you'll lose it. And that happens with people that, the average person. Part of aging, part of just not using it, because your body kind of thinks it doesn't need it. And your brain kind of thinks it doesn't need it, so it kind of just prunes it out, sets it aside, maybe goes into the back of the mind, and then over time, it disappears because you didn't think, your mind thinks that you don't need to do it anymore. So that's really very important. You need to do this because it's going to help you in the long run. And, you need to do this because it's a learning curve. And the more you do it, the more you can learn. Okay, so that's, the bit on the footwork. Now, I'm going to stay with that a little bit because I want to go into the square position. And I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to turn here. This is shifting of weight. So you say, well, I don't really do that normally. Why would I want to do that? Well, you're building strength in your legs. When you're shifting like this and taking it forward and backward, then you're going back to center, which is also coordination. It's a motor skill to take us from side to side. When you shift your weight forward and you shift your weight backwards, each one of the legs is taking up a certain amount of body weight. So when it takes up body weight, what happens? It becomes a weight-bearing exercise. So when you shift your weight back and you shift your weight forward, while it looks like some extreme position that you would normally go into, and that's not necessarily true, because sometimes you lean. Sometimes you lean into something to either move it or even lean because that's a position you need to get into to do something on a functional side. So when you go like that, but the thing is, going back to weight bearing, what happens when you bear weight on one side over time, doing it often, your legs get stronger. If this is holding 50% of your weight all the time, they will adapt, and it doesn't really feel like it needs to do anything. But once you shift your weight and it starts to bear weight, not only does it respond to what it needs, the muscular will get stronger, your bone matrix will respond to that. Everything that happens as a course of the shifting of weight, something will happen. There's a cause and effect. You go into that position, your body will respond. It responds in a way that you don't know that it's happening. So that's why just a mere thing of shifting the weight and moving forward or back changes, the outlook on everything that you're doing. So that's why it's so important to understand why we must shift, right? So we're going forward and back, and then we're pivoting, and we get more coordination and control in a direction. So look at this. I go forward, and this is the direction I was walking in. If I shift back and I turn, I end up in this direction. So that's another way of changing directions. So between this and this is 90 degrees, but I moved both feet. So you have to look, you can't do it with just one foot. You have to do both feet. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's really what has to happen as a strategy of learning to move, developing footwork, and it's a strategy to build increased flexibility in the hips, range of motion, shifting of weight. Now, do we need to do that to walk typically, just learning to walk? Probably not, because when an infant gets off the ground and starts to walk, it's usually just mimicking what the parent has taught, or maybe copying a sibling. They don't pivot their feet or move their ankles or do any of that stuff. They just get up and go through the rough motion, which is sort of stumbling through till you can maintain your balance, and then over time refine that so you can walk, whether it's in an erect position with a military stance, or all of this becomes a refinement. But the pivotal side of it becomes more of an advanced form of motion. So when we first learn to move, we don't actually understand this pivoting stuff because it's not required until you get to a later stage, and then you realize that pivoting and moving our feet does have its benefits and support to what we do. So depending on what you're doing with the legs outside of walking, it comes into play. So there's a lot of different things that we can bring in as a messaging. So we're here. That's the leg work. Okay. We're like this. We shift and we shift. Now let's go like this. We shift over here. Now this is where we find the center. 1, 2, 3. Now the hands go up. Now we went into a vertical direction. We shift over, go into a vertical direction. Now we have some hand and leg movement here. Now when I go down, I can stop here and then find the side position, shift the weight, move the hands, and then go up and then down and then across and then check. So this position is kind of a check. When you check your weight, this movement, this leg stays light. So checking your weight means to still carry the weight on the supporting leg, and the check is just for stability, knowing that you're still comfortable. You have the option of bringing your foot out, which is balance. You have the option of taking a step, and that applies to forward and backwards. Now, you also have the option of lifting this leg. And you say, well, I don't need to really do that because that doesn't really happen throughout the day. Until you have to walk up the stairs and you take your first step, then you say, well, how do I get this leg up on the other step? There's a height for a step that has been designed as the average height of that riser. It's usually around 7.5 inches to 8 inches. That's the normal step. That's really not so taxing, but yet probably efficient enough so you can get up the stairs without going over 100,000 steps to make it to the top. If you visited the Great Wall of China, the stairs there, when they made it back in the day before they knew that there's a step variant, they had steps that were all over the place. It's very difficult to walk upstairs when they're varying heights. So the consistent way is to know that each step is the same height, because you get muscle memory going upstairs, and if it's higher, you'll trip. If it's lower, you'll feel the stumbling. So just the fact that certain things are designed a certain way will affect how your body will adapt. So when we take this step and we lift the leg, that's the muscles you use. It's not going to affect your stair walking in the sense of the height, but it affects the way you go up the stairs because of the strength and balance. So when we lift, we always want to be balanced before we put the foot on the next step and shift the weight and then go up. And when you go down, it's the same way. And going down, you still want to be somewhat vertical, and you want to relax your ankles. So how you hold the rail, which is important, that takes some of the balancing out of it, but it doesn't really help to strengthen your legs. So everything that we're doing actually will help support you, and you get more comfortable, with some of these positions. So when we lift the leg, it's this group of muscles, and it's actually the higher you go, the higher up the contraction has to be in order to get your thigh up to a certain place. Now, what happens when your body is not flexible? Inflexibility in the back of the legs, or tightness or stiffness, causes conflict. So if you're trying to lift your leg with the strength of the muscle here, and the muscle's pulling back because it doesn't want it to go, then you have a conflict, and it takes more strength. So that's why if you build good movement and you build the correct movement, then you're going to have less conflict, and it's going to be much more efficient. And efficiency means using less energy, and less energy means you can do it for a longer period of time. So it's like driving your car. You only have a half a tank, you can only go so far. You have a full tank, you can go get a little further. But if it's inefficient and you're burning a lot of fuel, it doesn't matter how much fuel you have. You're going to waste it. So if you're moving, you want to be as efficient as possible. So efficient as possible means good movement, controlled movement, and not wasting any energy. Okay. Again, deep breathing. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. So right now it's about 7. Okay, now let's get into the silk reeling exercise. So this is something that builds upper body and some of the coordination involved. So what's going on here? We have the forward and back again. In Tai Chi, we always do that forward and back type thing in the leg work because it's filling and emptying on waiting and waiting. We're building strength in the legs and building adaptability in the body form. When we move from here to here and then back, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are sort of the points that we reach, and it's a cycle. So when we're here, the body also turns. This is the turning that we're talking about to take us in a direction. So if I turn, this is the way I'm headed. If I sit back and then I turn, this is the way I'm headed. Okay. Turning creates directions of force that we're not going to get into, but the thing is, when we turn here and we go like this and we turn like this, we're creating a direction of movement. So when I'm facing this way, and the body is actually 90 degrees to the camera, I'm like this. Now, without moving anything else but the torso and a bit of the weight going into this leg, facing you would be like this. So I have this position and I have this position. Now, if I open my hands like this, the palms are facing each other. If I go forward and I bring this lower hand up and the upper hand down, I create this posture. And then I sit back, and then I turn toward the mirror, and then I just drop this hand. That's basically what's happening. All we're doing is putting a limb in one place and another. That's really a position in space in a certain order. So when I'm here, I'm like this. When I'm here, I'm like this. When I'm here, I'm like this. And then when I'm back to here, I'm like this to set this up again. So you see, all of these positions, when we combine them as a specific order, then we create this action. And then once you smooth it out, it becomes one continuous cycle, and it looks very smooth. It doesn't look conflicted. And you create a response. The body starts to pick up on the movement. It starts to become more and more relaxed. It starts to use the correct muscle groups, and it starts to cycle through, and you build. Because the more you use the neurons up here, and the more you build the motor skill type things in the body, the more awareness and sensitivity you build. And who knows what could happen when you start to stimulate that side. That's going to build, you know, lots of things that your body didn't recognize before. And hopefully all of these ideas will help prevent some of the progression that Parkinson's may offer, or, well, you know, might be there. The thing is, what we're trying to do while they're doing research and development is to buy time for them to find out what else they can do to help people with, you know, this particular discrepancy in movement. So when we build and we work off of the ideas, we're just working with it, training the body to develop anything and everything that it didn't know in the past. And then, who knows, you just will become better and better at it. So here again, we're here. We don't have the mirror there, but we're like this. There's 1 and 2. Now I'm facing you, and then the hands like this. And then this goes up, and this goes down, and this goes back. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a lot of times when we're doing any of these movements, it's really a mind over matter. You practice something, you'll get good at it. You know, I was watching a video, or I read something, I forget exactly how the content came in, but it was a person in Russia, you know, a very accomplished person. He developed Parkinson's, and you know, he was devastated. But then he took up ballroom dancing, and he got a partner, and he worked at it so hard, became a competitor, and he become great at, you know, ballroom dancing. And what he said, I'm going to do this forever. I'm going to practice ballroom dance forever. And what's going to end up happening, he said, is I'm going to work it until they figure out or discover a cure. So that was his motivation. Ballroom dancing isn't for everyone. Ballroom dancing, you also need a partner. When you're doing something like Tai Chi self-cultivation, you can practice essentially with the same concept and idea, with the striving forward, wanting to build and learn motor skill, and then hope that there's a prevention developed at some point, or at the same time using this as a tool, as a vehicle to overcome some of problems that you may be having, or relearn some of the things that you've lost. So that's really part of the goal, and that's one of the reasons why I'm teaching this, to give you a tool, to give you a method, a system to understand what's involved in moving, in walking, in, you know, whatever it is, talking. Everything is learned. Everything is achieved through an understanding. So once you have something to work with it. Work with what we're doing, and we'll see that there's guaranteed some form of benefit, whether it's circulation or, you know, one of the important things when you have great circulation is really look at the food that you're eating, the nutrients. Make sure you're getting the right nutrients, and make sure that whatever you're bringing into the body and you're circulating it through, that it's going to take it to where it's supposed to go to, and that it's, you know, going to give you enough of those building blocks that you need, whether it's in the brain or in the body or in your gut. All of this stuff is one system that has to work together. So the only part that I can help you with is the movement side. And the movement side is, you can enhance it, but you have to bring in the right nutrients, and you have to work with that to support your body, so that, you know, you have something that's strong, that you can try to overcome whatever issues you may have. Okay, so that's silk reeling, and then we have this opening and closing movement. We're going to balance on one leg again, and open and close, open and close. Now this is expanding. Now this is good for what? It's good for reaching the limits of your limbs, right? Your upper body's reaching. But what is it doing? It's releasing the tension in here. It's releasing the tension, because the back is actually rounding, and it's opening and rounding and opening. Let's switch the other side. open and close. So you have a cross hand position, which is your sun line. Open and close. Open and close. Open and close. Open and close. So how the body expands and contracts is really how you move and manipulate the skeletal structure. So you're moving this area, the chest, the ribs, your sternum, this area, the shoulder girdle. All of this stuff has to move because all of that stuff is part of what has to be, part of breathing and part of lifting and accommodating the breath. So if this area is very tight, your breathing is going to be a little bit compromised because it doesn't allow for the expansion and contraction of the lungs. Your diaphragm doesn't work efficiently. All these are driven by muscles. So you have to move these muscles because muscles need to constantly be stimulated by contracting and releasing and contracting. That's the balance and motion. So breath and movement, breath is all tied together. And this is something that we know we need to breathe. But how do we breathe and, how efficient is that breath? So that's really part of that. And then learning how to breathe with our movement over time begins like the deep breathing exercise. Like when we inhale and exhale, when we breathe in and exhale. That's all building coordination between the breath, the movement, and how this area, the thoracic area and the ribs and the abdominal muscles, how all they kind of come into play when we breathe. And we know that they're involved when you like bang your rib or you have an injury and when you breathe it hurts. There's a reason it hurts. It's because that area has been injured or compromised. So then you feel it there because it starts to move, right? Anytime you have something that's a discomfort that moves, shows up. If you have a slight injury, if you hurt your back when you breathe, it hurts. If you hurt right between your shoulder blades and you breathe, it hurts. Those areas are normally moving when you breathe. So we're learning how to expand our body through expansive movement. That's what opening and closing. So I'm just bringing up all these things because if Tai Chi is practiced as a health benefit or an exercise that's going to enhance and support, better health, a better quality of life, or prevention of certain type of degeneration, you have to understand that's why it works. That's why we do this. And it's really, it seems mystical in some way. There's no magic to it. It's just you have to understand what actually happens. By understanding how the human body needs to bring some of these concept of movement in. And, that's the only side of what I focus on as movement coordination and the ability to do this because that's, what I've done all my life to understand why movement is essential to life. So because it's essential to life, why? How does it work? It works based on the principles and everything that's being researched today, from the brain down to the sole of your feet. This is all, real information that we haven't put together because we don't know how to. I put it together to the interpretation and understanding of how science and movement work together. So the Tai Chi Paradigm is a modern approach to an antiquated way. We take old thoughts, bring it into the 21st century and say, okay, how does exercise work? Why do we need to exercise? Why is exercise prescribed to everybody, at all ages? Why is exercise important? Is it exercise because it's just a term? It can be used in different formats, but the thing is that exercise is doing something over and over again so the body adapts and learns. So that's what an exercise is. It could be a drill. Just like you could understand that from learning in school that we do exercises and we do drills. That's how kids learn. You do it through repetition and do it over and over again. Well, movement is the same way. We do it through exercises and drills. You take that concept, and that's how the human learns. That's how we manipulate the ideas, and it's absorbed and it's interpreted, and it's the brain does all of this, and then it becomes perception of what we gain from this information. And that information, so the goal is to take the information that I'm giving you, and you take it in, and then you take that information and you teach your body. And what happens to the body? It becomes more intelligent. So it's the physical side of learning. When you build this intelligence in the body, you develop the same infrastructure up here that we use in typical learning, but it just seems like it's different, but it's not. It's the same process. It's nothing mystical about this. This is something that's been done for a decade, for centuries, generations, since the creation of man. We all do things this way. We got smarter over time, and in some ways we got too smart. But the thing is, this is how it happens. So when we're doing these movements, as simple as I try to bring it down to that it's not easy. You have to go through a process. And that process is a metamorphosing of what happens, because we have to change our whole attitude of how we perceive learning to be. So that's why I talk a lot more than I physically do, because I want you to understand that learning is, in different, gradations. Some people only learn here, but I want you to learn it here, because that's the physical side of learning, and you have to bring that information into the body. All right. So what we just did, let's do before we leave is the forward step backward. So we step right, left, right. You notice my feet are not that spread apart. It's not shoulder width. We're going right, left, right, left, right, left. Okay, so that's forward and back. Okay, now we're going to do the 3 circles clockwise. Okay, we didn't do these today, and we didn't do these today. I'm going to work more on that the next class on Thursday, to work the torso area. So we're here, 1, 2, 3, and there's balance. We're going backwards, left, right, left, and there's balance. And we're walking through, but we're pausing here to get a sense of where the body is. And when the hands are back and down, they're up, and down. So down at the 3rd step is really synchronized. 1, 2, 3, down. Now this may take a little bit of practice for the coordination. So it's clockwise forward, counterclockwise backward. Okay, just look at the clock going forward, and then when you go back, go backwards. So, when you go backwards, you're reversing the time. When you go forward, you're going clockwise. You're moving ahead in the clock. So that's an easy way to figure that out. And then when we go from side to side with the cloud hands, and we didn't do this, that's really the shifting. So let's do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So without stepping, we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you have 6 movements that you can practice just like that. And when I go like this, 1, the vertical hand and the vertical leg on the same side, this is the weight-bearing leg. 1, this is 2, that's the weight-bearing. So eventually you'll develop this relationship of the stable side, because you have elbow down and this. So in cloud hand, it's like this. Okay. So I say cloud hands like this because there may be some other movements where it's not exactly the same. Because when I say I go like this is up with the elbow here. This is down with the elbow here. So every posture and position could have a different relationship. So not all relationships are the same. As we know how difficult relationships can be, they're not always created equal. So I think on that note, we're running out of time. I'll see you Thursday. Give us a thumbs up. Hope the information is good enough for you to share. And if you share it, I hope everyone benefits. And YouTube's the way to go. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good week. And when I see you Thursday, you will have mastered those movements. All right?